Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. The month of July. Dog days of summer are here. I'm actually at the James River right now, and it is a hot one. And so, being that it's been so hot, this is definitely changing some things up throughout the summertime, and there's some things that are definitely unfolding now. Things are a little bit further ahead in my part of the country, and it seems that way that like dog days of summer have gotten here a little bit quicker than normal. That being said, there's still some great bass fishing to be had, and we're going to dive into my favorite baits for this month of July. I mean, July can be a time where you got to go out in the mornings or the evenings to beat the heat. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you have plenty of water, make sure you get plenty of sunscreen, put your buffs on, your sun gloves on, all that good stuff. And that's something that you definitely need to be taking care of yourself during this month, because it is definitely one of the hottest ones. But there is some really good bass fishing to be had. A lot of times people transition to night fishing this time of year, especially in the south. Big spinner baits and chatter baits and stuff like that is a big player. But we're going to dive into my favorite baits for the month of July and why right now. So first off, we're going to start off with a chatterbait. You can't go wrong with a chatterbait in July because you just cover water. What happens a lot of times in July is the fish in June, May and June, they get out offshore. Now they're starting to filter back shallow. There's still bluegill spawns going on. There's still red ear that are spawning. The bait starts to push back further into grass. And so that's when a chatterbait is going to be great. Whether you're fishing around boat docks, whether you're fishing around grass edges, a chatterbait's a great bait. Paired up with a freeloader is my preference. I love that, that good shimmy. I like a pin-tailed trailer on a chatterbait, especially this time of year, because it gives it, you hear like the hunting action of a crankbait. It gives it the exact same sort of hunting action. That chatterbait will be moving, and then all of a sudden it'll kick off the side, and that's a lot of times when you trigger the bite on a chatterbait. As far as colors go, it's like a Bee-Hite Delight of a jackhammer. I've thrown several others, green pumpkin. Just match it up to what you personally are dealing with. I mean, I think a bluegill color this time of year is probably one of the better ones. But that being said, I do like a chatterbait on a slower gear ratio reel. So 6.8 to 1 gear ratio, 6.2 to 1 gear ratio. This time of year, most of the time I want it on a slower gear ratio. This time of year, they're a little bit faster. I might go to a 7.4 the most, but I want that bait to be ticking, and especially if I'm fishing deeper grass or deeper, and I want that bait to get down there a little bit further, I need to slow. I have a tendency to go too fast and not let the bait get down there towards the bottom. And that's a lot of times when you're gonna get more of your bites, or down there towards the top of the grass. And that's a lot of times when you're gonna get the most bites. So that's what I prefer. 17-pound Sufix Advanced Fluorocarbon. And this is like straight up my favorite chatterbait rod. This is my 7.4 Jacob Wheeler Select Series chatterbait rod. This rod is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal. It just gets them, and it's great for casting out there in that grass and clearing the grass free and generating the bites. So that being said, chatterbait's great, but let me talk a little bit about where I'm going to be throwing a chatterbait in the month of July. And right now I'm actually on one of the most famous bass fishing lakes in the world. What is that? What is that? Lake Guntersville, Gville. So Guntersville is really cool. This is CMAP. CMAP's did a great job with Guntersville and really documenting what, and getting the topo of the body of water. We're actually up here towards the South Saudi area of the lake. And so what I'm looking for this time of year is places that are still going to get current. So like, for instance, the bluegill will still spawn in places like this, and they'll still have a remnants of some bluegill spawning. Typically, is what I've seen. Not the majority of the bluegill spawn in May, but you still have some that'll spawn deeper. So your deeper grass is gonna tend to be a little bit better. So the places like where a bluegill might spawn, the first spawn happens up there in the corner right there. Now the bluegill spawn happens out here in that little drain, if you will. Because they're getting, the water temperature gets higher, it gets deeper and deeper, and that's where you start to look for red ear and bluegill, and that's where a lot of times the bass are adjacent to those fish. So if I'm thinking of bluegill are spawning out here, and the majority of the bluegill that the fish are feeding on are in those zones, I'm going to look for those flats adjacent to it. So this is a great little area right here, this hump right there, that deal. Those are places I'm going to throw that chatterbait around that I feel like I could find a group of fish, little subtle points that have grass on them. Same places you might be looking for, because you have to think the grass might be up 4 feet in this scenario. It might be 4 feet from the top. So a 1/2 ounce chatterbait will be a great bait to wind around and fish around and that stuff. Now, that's something that I like to do, especially mornings, evenings, or in those days that the wind's blowing really good, or you have a lot of boat traffic. A lot of times your chatterbait bite will be better. So that's when I'm going to really start to look at that. Sometimes boat traffic does not hurt the bite as long as it doesn't muddy the water up too much. It just keeps the things moving, and a lot of times we don't have a lot of flow all over the country this time of year. So that's one that chatterbait's really going to play. The one thing I do like a chatterbait for in the summertime though is winding around and just fishing, covering water, and fishing around docks, fishing around rock, fishing around wood. Go, 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 go. That is what I personally really like a chatterbait for. So that is my number one pick for the month of July. Number two is something fun. You got to have a topwater bait. And for my old school friends out there, an old school popper is a bad little dude. This is a skitter pop, Rapala skitter pop. I like this because this is what happens. The shad spawns already happened in like maybe early May. And the bait starts to get, there's a ton of small bait that gets in our lakes, at least down south, and they start to have schooling activity in the month of July. This is the first time that the fish will start to key on smaller bait. This is the first time in the year, because they typically are feeding on last year's spawn, which is already 3-4 inches. Now you have a whole bunch of little shad fry swimming around, and that's when I'm throwing a popping style bait like that. So whether they're focusing on the skitter pop itself, which is about the size of the shad from last year, or the feather on the back that I put on. Now this is a black one, but it was just because I was on a river. But typically I'll put white on the back. That is my setup. I love throwing that thing around, fishing around grassy areas, fishing around seawalls, fishing it around little points, shallow points. If you have no grass in your lakes, shallower points in the mornings, little pockets. It's just backs of creeks, a popping style bait, and not there's multiple different styles of poppers. Like this is like more of like an old school, like P70 style popper right here. This is like more of like a chugging popper. This is actually a popping pop face. It's actually discontinued. It's a 13 fishing popper. It's a really good one, actually. One of my favorites. But that's different. That's a target popper versus this is more of like fishing flats popping style. It's more of a spitting action pop, 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 pop. I'm like pop, 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 pop. That's sort of what I'm normally utilizing with that with. 7, medium heavy, lighter tip, pretty fast tip. And I like braid on a lot of my top waters overall. 30-pound braid if I'm throwing a lighter top water, 40-pound if I'm throwing a walking bait, and probably 40 or 50 if I'm throwing probably 50 if I'm throwing a buzz bait. But that's sort of typically what I'll do. A higher gear ratio, 6-8 to 1 gear ratio, or 8-3 to 1 gear ratio is what I prefer. Just because like when they bite it, I want to be able to catch up to them and get those fish in the boat. So that's it for the popper. Let's talk about real quick here where I'm going to focus on. Same sort of general area in South Saudi, but let's just sort of look here. I mean, same sort of thing. This is a really good thing. Now, okay, this can work on both sides. I'm going to talk for my friends that have grass out there. Still those humps that are coming up there where that grass is topping out around these islands. These places are going to be great. But also backs of these creeks. The back ends of these creeks like are good. Those flats for my friends that have grass in their bodies of water. My friends that do not have grass. Steeper stretches like this one right here. Seawalls that have vertical cut, vertical stretches of seawall. That can be a great way to catch fish. These little steeper places right here is where a lot of times I'll fish. And I'll still fish in the backs if your water's fairly clear. And this is the first time they'll actually start to make the move back in the backs of the creeks as well. July is like the month that they start to get way back in the creek, or on the flat in the back of the very back of the creek, like this guy right here, or in this pocket in the flat, because the bait goes back there. Again, this year's spawn of shad moved to the backs of the creek. A lot of times there's more fertile water, is where I think it is, and I might be completely wrong on that. So you can completely tell me I'm wrong. That's fine, but I just feel that way, and it's not, doesn't mean it's factual, which is how I feel. They move back there, and so the bass will make a migration of bass will move back in the backs of the creeks. Not all of them, just a few of them, and those fish are susceptible to being caught. So next on my list is going to be for the flippers in the back of the creek. A streamline flipping bait is what I really prefer. 7, 6, this is a 7 heavy, but I really want something more streamlined. This is where weight of your flipping bait will be really important as well. The weight. Right now I have a 5/16, I believe, on the, that's a quarter on here. because I'm fishing in a river that has a lot of mud. If you have a lot of mud on your body of water, if you're not a highland reservoir, you might want to go with a lighter weight. If you have more of a hard bottom, but I also feel like heavy weights generate bites too. They make them react. So if they're acting goofy and you know there's fish in the area, I might throw a heavy weight. If they're not, and you're just trying to make the most realistic presentation, I would go with like a quarter or a 5/16. The 5/16 is probably my favorite flipping weight. 3/0 right here is a 3/0 straight shank VMC red line straight shank hook. And then this guy is your first sneak peek of the new Crush City Hedgehog. I can't give you close-ups, but I'm gonna give you that guy right there. He's pretty legit. And I like streamlined plastics a lot of times this time of year, because I feel like the bass can really, and this is a lot from like my mentors, my boys BJ and Wallman, like the fish really liked a worm profile. They like a streamlined flipping bait profile when it gets hot. The hotter it is, the more streamlined. I really like my plastics because I feel like they can process that, like they could actually their body can process that easier than they can with something super bulky. Now, that's not saying a 5-pounder, she's a bluegill, he's not eating that. But I'm just saying that's just my mindset. That's really, I was taught that. So again, another thing, just an opinion, not a fact. Not a fact, but it's just my personal opinion on it. Okay, next down, before we jump into that, I do have to show you guys where I'm gonna be fishing. The backs of the creeks is where I'm gonna be flipping a lot of my time. Backs of the creeks, flats like this. It says stumps right here. It's good to see the stumps. If there's any stumps you can see, lay down logs are all great places. Steep banks right here. And also, if your lake doesn't have a lot of grass in it, main lake flats, like main lake docks. You can, like down this stretch right here would be a great stretch to flip docks, because it's like flatter docks. Those are, the fish start to get on the flats, on the main river, on the main lake, on the secondary stuff. That's, the flats start to be the deal. That is where the bass start to live from July on. Like, to me, that's where the majority of the population starts to move to. And that's where I'm gonna focus my time and energy if I'm fishing these types of bodies of water. So, next on the list is a bait that dominates in the pre-spawn, but absolutely crushes them in the summertime. And we've shown that at the Chowan. I've caught a few fish here at the James River on it, and that is a PXR Maverick from Rapala. This bait right here's caught a lot of bass, and a lot of bass in the summertime. Historically, I feel like the first person to ever do this was more Kevin, not the first person, but the first professional to really play this game and throw a jerkbait in the summertime more than anything. And I feel like a lot of it, just the fact of where he's from, is Kevin Van Dam. So now we are understanding how effective a jerkbait is in the summer. The difference is you're speeding up your jerkbait so much faster. You're really working that bait fast and trying to cover water and trying to make the fish react. In the summertime, I'll give you a for instance. In the springtime, I'm casting out there, I'm jerk, 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 jerk. In the summertime, I'm casting out there, I'm like jerk, 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 jerk. I'm moving, my cadence is faster, I'm moving more water, I'm covering more ground, and the fish will react. Like, I feel like the fish in the summertime, the way, that's one thing that I do enjoy on Four Fish Sonar. I've learned they process information faster in the summertime than they do when it's cold. And what I mean by that is, I'll throw a jerkbait out there, and I'll jerk and throw it down there, pop, 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 start working it. And in the wintertime, those fish take a long time and they might bite it at the boat. In the summertime, you throw your jerkbait out there and those fish start following it, running after it, and they're like, oh no, I'm not eating that. Like, they make up their mind quicker. So you have to move your baits faster. So something that I've learned personally is you're moving your bait faster to make those fish, react. And that's why I'm really big on that. As far as colors go, the water's dirty here, so I'm throwing that, I think it's snow something. More like a white opaque color jerkbait. And then, it really just depends on the clarity. Matte Shad's obviously one of my favorites. But don't be afraid to play around with line size either. I'm throwing 17-pound fluorocarbon on this rod right now to keep it shallower, because I'm fishing it shallower. So don't be afraid to throw 20 or 17, because it doesn't affect this bait that much to me, and it catches a lot of fish. So that's on the list. Next on the list is for all my creek fishermen. Hey, creek fishing and just fishing in general. This is the time to put the bass boat up and go wade a creek. This is the month, like this month in August, September, the water on those creeks get lower. It's my favorite time of year. Gosh, I love it. And a Ned rig, you can't go wrong with a little Ned rig right here. A BLT, Ned BLT. Personally, it's one of my favorite things to do. Throwing that, I'll probably have 2 rods. I'll probably have that skitter pop. I'm gonna have a Ned bait for a creek. That's what I'm gonna do. Because I feel like there's nothing better than just going back and walking a creek and just fishing old school. You know, like casting at eddies and getting a bite and catching rock bass and catching smallmouth and catching largemouth, catching spotted bass in some parts of the country. That is so much fun. So I actually challenge you guys. Get out there if you get a little time. Go to a local creek that you can wade. Get you a good set of shoes that you ain't gonna go get a piece of glass in your foot. All right, wade that creek. Grab you a top water. Grab you 2 rods. Well, you can grab one because one's probably a lot easier. Ned rig, little skitter pop, and go to work. Spinner rod, catching fish. It'll revitalize you. It really has. I've done it a couple times. Mark has the Creek series. MDJ does. It's just something that's just so much fun. You know, one of my favorite things to do is run a jet boat up a creek and just even wade a creek. It's just phenomenal. Now, that being said, a Ned rig is also it's also one of my top picks for the lake fishermen as well. The guys that are out here just fishing main bodies of water, because the fish when you're fishing offshore and the fish are getting pressured, or in the grass, they've seen all the worms. I want a Ned bait popping out of the grass. It generates bites on even the best fisheries in this country, or even the worst ones. And so this guy right here has a lot of action. You can see how whippy he is. It's that Ned BLT. He's more of an elongated worm. Has a little bit more action. That Green Pumpkin Magic is my favorite. I stick with like a 3/16 or a quarter. This is actually a new Ned head that's coming out from BMC. I've been prototyping it. It's pretty legit. And so yeah, so that to me, a Ned bait is great. Throwing it, you know, in those creeks, it's pretty self-explanatory. But on the main lake, I'm gonna probably be fishing this on schools or in grass. Groups of fish, grass, points. You want to go out and catch a few fish in the summertime, just throw a Ned bait. You'll get bites. July is still like, I don't call July the dog days of summer. I call August the dog days of summer, because like everything's like everything's where it's going to be at in August, and it's like the fish have already gotten pressured. They know what's up. You really got to throw a Ned bait in August, but I'm bringing them out early for you all because you need to. So it's rod size 7/0 medium. Fast rod tip. I would say an 1/8 to a 1/4 ounce jig head is what I prefer. 16th maybe in a creek if there's no flow. 8-pound nano braid. 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. That Vanford 2500 works really well, and that's my setup right there. So that is the group. Last but not least is going to be a wacky worm for my shallow water fishermen. You just gotta have, if you're fishing shallow, you gotta have a wacky worm tied on. That crossover ring is truly a game changer. I know game changer is probably the most overused term in bass fishing. Game changer, like that Minn Kota game changer. I'm like, so I know it's the most overused scenario, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that wacky worm as well. This guy catches a lot of fish, and he's really good in those scenarios of casting around, fishing around boat docks. If there is no flow, if there's something going on, or if there's fish shallower, like the one thing that happens this time of year as well on like highland reservoirs is wolf packs of bass. The biggest bass in the lake are on the bank a lot of times. So they're on the bank, they're wolf packed up eating bluegill and shad. So like you'll see a wolf pack of 6 or 8 bass, and that's when I'll pick up a wacky worm, cast it over there, catch it. That's what I do. So now let me jump in before I leave here. Let me talk to you guys a little bit about where I'm going to use each of those baits, the Ned rig, the jerk bait, and the wacky worm, because I didn't get a chance to do that on the Lowrance unit. So first off, the jerk bait, I would actually go down the main river grass line right here. Like if I'm fishing out there, I'm going to go down that main river grass line, or like a grass line like right there. Even jerking, I'm throwing a jerk bait around docks and hardcover. on this body of water would be something that I would look at doing. I think you would generate a lot of bites throughout the day because they don't see that, and they're starting to move back shallow. So I think that would be something. A drain, up in the drain itself, like somewhere in here where there's some grass, and this actual creek channel where there's grass on each side, that would be a place I would throw a jerk bait. As far as the Ned rig goes, you know, places that the schools of fish have already got broken up on that are real obvious, like mouths of creeks, that's where I'm going to throw a Ned rig, you know, or the grass flats themselves. I'm going to throw and pop a Ned rig around. Something that has a little more depth to it, pop that Ned rig around. Stuff like that right there is where I'm going to really focus, or these mouths of these creeks where I know there's been schools of fish there, and now they're pressured. Drag a Ned rig around, you'd be surprised what you might catch. And don't sleep on that grass. I'm telling you, Ned rigging grass works great, and that just absolutely catches them. And then for my wacky worm fisherman, I'm going to stick more to the pockets. More to the pockets, whether you're a highland water fisherman where there's really steep rock, like Table Rock and stuff like that, or you're fishing a place like Gunnersville. In the backs of the creeks, the pockets, the places that I feel like those fish are really their main diet for the summertime is focusing on bluegill. That's where I want to utilize that wacky worm. I can visually see those fish, a lot of times seeing them with my eyes, cast to them, and some of the biggest bass in the lake do not go deep in the summertime, and this is the fish that I'm targeting with that wacky worm. So that is my setup for the month of July. That's what she is. It's been a pretty solid June so far. Had two good tournaments, and we have this one still left to go. So got some work to do, and wish me luck, and we'll talk to you guys on the next one.